Hi, this is Dr. Toby Moma, host of your show Health and Wellness with Dr. Toby. We want to invite you to watch our show this week with Dr. Clara Reed. Dr. Clara Reed is a master's student who's a nursing program graduate from Mississippi Valley College, and she also has a doctorate degree, honorary doctorate degree from Jackson State University. She's currently the CEO of Mid Delta Home Health and Hospice. She's a Christian pastor, runs a church that is about 600 members strong, employs a home health company that employs about 600 members, and she's pioneering diverse investments in the Mississippi area. You will be encouraged, you will be inspired. Married for 54 years, 2 children, 13 grandchildren, a successful mother, wife, pastor, preacher, grandmother, great grandmother now. We want you to hear what she has to say to inspire you. Don't forget, join us this week. Dr. Clara Reed is my guest. God bless you. Hi, this is Dr. Toby Moma, your host on Health and Wellness with Dr. Toby. It's a pleasure to be with you. Don't touch that dial. We have a great program. Dr. Clara Reed, Chief Executive, Mid Delta Home Health and Hospice, Mississippi. She had a branch in Louisiana, but she closed it a few years ago. And she's here with us. She wants to impart her knowledge, impart her wisdom in the next generation. She's a woman of many sorts. She's a mother, a wife, grandmother, pastor, a preacher. A great grandma too. Wow, praise the Lord. And she's just one of those women that you want to sit and listen to as long as you can. So don't touch that dial. She has a lot of pearls that she wants to share with you today. And on our last topic, we talked about her background, her family, and we started discussing her relationship. She got married at a young age. She's going to tell us when, but she's been married for 54 years, and we wanted to know what is the reasons, the secret, what was the platform that gave her this ability for longevity in her marriage, because unfortunately the African American race is being decimated by divorce. We have 80% divorce rates across the board and even in the churches, and we need to at least discuss this issue and see what we can do to make a difference. So I threw that question to Ms. Reed and said, what can we do to help stem this spiraling statistic that is affecting us so badly?
Well, great question. There aren't any magic answers. Marriage is a very serious undertaking, and your vows, you have to make sure that's what you want. And we get to know if we courting in our courtship, we got to know each other, but you don't really know your partner
Oh, really?
until you
Okay,
marry them and spend time with them. And you spend time together during your courtship, but not like you're living together. So we met when we were eighth grade. So we courted through those years, like 19 years. And we were both 25. I got married on my 25th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And that, I think, maturity has a role in longevity in marriage. What are you willing to accept? What are you willing to take? What are you willing to forgive? What are you willing to share? Communication is so important. Now, when we got married, like I said, we both I had finished college, nursing school, but I had finished LPN school, but he was still in school at Alcorn University. So when we decided, we had been talking about getting married. So when we got married, I came from Jackson to Vicksburg. He came from Alcorn to Vicksburg, and we got married at his pastor's house. Yeah.
Oh.
And so when we get married, I don't think God ever intended for the woman to put her brain on the chef
Oh.
and move by the man's command. Now, all of us have our God has his plan for all of us.
Right.
So when we get married, there's a union. And because of that union, and we took our vows, we took those vows and we took them seriously. Now, absolutely, it doesn't mean that everything's peaches and cream. It doesn't mean that every day is a day of sunshine. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get upset with each other at some point. But the goal is to talk to each other,
Right.
to reason together, and to forgive each other. So we all make mistakes. None of us are perfect. But it's that respect that we have for each other. Now, he was teaching school, and I was a nurse. So it wasn't as if we were working together all day, every day, every week. So we had things to talk about during that time. But it's where you want to go. What are your goals? What are you going to work together? What are you going to do in that marriage? So I think it is the communication, the respect that you have for the other. You grow to love each other more. I sometimes when we're sitting in the den and talking, we kind of like the same kinds of movies. Now I can watch CNN all day,
Oh,
but he gets tired of it. But Wheel of Fortune and all those kinds of
oh,
things,
really?
NCIS, you have things in common.
Right.
Now I grew up in the Methodist church. My family grew up in the Methodist church. My grandparents were Methodist, but he grew up in the Baptist church. My dad was a Baptist preacher.
Oh.
I liked the Baptist church. I liked the Baptist gospel singing, which that did not happen in the Methodist church. You did hymns, and that was it. So it's that sharing of information, respecting each other, being honest.
Wow.
If you like what's going on, but if you have issues with it, talk about it. You know, there's been times in our marriage when we considered a divorce. Okay. But I think he determined that it was cheaper to keep me. So we have been able to weather the storms and raise our children. We have one biological child, Pam, and then we adopted our son when our oldest was 10 years old.
Wow.
So Trey is our adopted son. So it's just give and take and share and respect.
What do you think of a lot of people saying their in-laws are the problem? Third party, their sisters-in-law, their mother-in-law, their father-in-law. They kind of make excuses for the failure of their marriage. I mean, did you have to contend with your sisters-in-law or your parents-in-law? Were there issues in your marriage?
There were very few in-law issues. When after Henry and I were married 2 years, I got pregnant with our oldest daughter. I was still living in Jackson and working at university at the time. When Pam was born, the night we got home, she cried all night. He was in Belzona teaching in Indianola. So I called him. I said, come get us. So that's how we got back to Belzona at that time. His mother had a grocery store. There were living quarters in the back of the store. So that was our first home together.
Oh.
But she was a very, very good mother-in-law, very nice, very cordial.
How about his father?
His father was a totally kind of quiet man,
Okay.
like Henry is. But he was a big farmer.
Oh, okay.
And so he was in the field most of the time. But we had dinner together, those kinds of things, family gatherings together. So there was never a problem like mother-in-law interfering with your marriage and things
Right.
like that. Now, you talk and you have a conversation about some things, but there was no interference. It's like you figure it out.
Mm.
you
Some
know.
some other people say I'm paranoid because I my parents failed their marriage, so I treat my husband like as if he's gonna run away. So I talk to him from a paranoid perspective. I mean, did you have that? Because you said your dad wasn't really there. Did you have that issue in your marriage where you had that thought in the back of your mind that this won't last? My dad didn't stay. Why would Henry stay? Did you ever go through that challenge
I
like some
I
women?
really didn't, because when I was 4 years old, that's when my dad left.
Mm,
And so um, that was never an issue because I accepted him for who he was, and I didn't compare him with
mhm,
anybody else or what had happened in other marriages, even in my own mother's marriage. So that never was an issue. And my mom used to tell me that I was bossy. I tell people they're not bossy. They have leadership skills, you
okay.
know. So I was kind of always independent. And that may have been one of the issues in our marriage. I was independent. I knew who I was. I did what I wanted to do. And even though we were married, I didn't put my brains on the shelf. I didn't think that
Mhm.
God intended that. So there were three things I said to Henry, that you can't tell me how to wear my hair. You can't tell me how to dress. I'm not going to do anything to embarrass me, but or my family or my marriage. And you can't tell me when I can go and come. So there was that understanding, and I did that. Now it didn't mean that um, that we didn't go some places together. We
Right.
did that, but those were never issues. We just had that understanding.
Mhm.
And when we were married, when I went back to school to get my RN, so um, after I started the home health agency, I was the first black Afro American nurse to be the director of nurses at the small hospital in Belzoma. Okay. After that, when I started to get into the home health business, and so I was always going to meetings. When I was
Mhm.
director of nurses at the hospital, I was always away at meetings, doing, learning, schooling, and all of that.
Mhm.
So it our marriage was more like a partnership
Mhm.
than a person who he was
Unit.
here and you there.
Right.
We were, well, the Bible story. God took the ribs from Adam's side, not from his back. So I never walked back there.
So that brings us to my next question. A lot of African American women are not pioneers in business. I mean, the statistics say probably less than, of all the American owned businesses, less than 10% are owned by African American women. We have a lot more independent Caucasian and Oriental women opening businesses. What do you, I mean, in terms of the philosophy of your marriage, was it a challenge getting, because let me get this straight. You spent almost 7 to 10 years going through LPN, RN.
Hmm.
Then you went to University of Mississippi, worked at the UMC
Right.
for like a year or two.
From my when I finished LPN school, I worked in Vicksburg at the hospital after graduation for
Right.
about 6 months. Then I moved to Jackson.
And worked at
Hmm.
UMC.
Worked at UMC as an LPN.
Okay.
After Pam, my daughter, was born, I moved back to Belzona. I took a job at Greenwood Full Hospital in Greenwood, and that's when, after that time, I went back to school at Mississippi
Uh,
Valley.
and then after you
Right.
got your RN, you became the director of nursing in the Belzoni.
Small hospital in
Right.
Belzona.
Wow.
Um, I was good at what I did. I was a good nurse because I cared about people.
Mm,
And so after that point, after I was worked there for about 7 years. 5 of those years probably a director of nurses
okay.
there. Hmm.
Was it around that same time there was all this racial segregation riots in Belzoni where somebody was killed?
Hmm.
I think.
Reverend George Lee was
Right.
killed, civil rights
When they were
pioneer.
marching.
There were marches. As I mentioned, my aunt Mary Thomas was one of the civil rights pioneers, along with several other people there. And because she was in business, they tried to do away with her business. She she told us a story, and it's a true story. one night she was lying in bed, and because it was hot, not air conditioned, we didn't have, so she had raised the window, and she wasn't asleep. She was just lying there, and all of a sudden she saw this shadow come up. It was houses, her house and the next house, and a man came up between those houses, and he had paper in his hand, and he took a match and struck it. He was fixing to burn her house down. She was lying there, and she said, "Don't do that." And he put the match out and left. The next day,
Wow.
she had some Caucasian business folk come to visit her. "Did you see anybody around your house last night?" And she said, "Yes." "Did you recognize who it was?" She said, "No."
Oh, wow.
She did, but she said no because she knew the next thing she would be lynched or
Wow.
hung. So during that era of civil rights, it was a tough time for Afro American, but we didn't know much different except
Right.
what was going on. After that, they integrated. My same aunt, her children were the first to go to school with integration. Um, so during that time, we made it through, but we hadn't traveled to different. I hadn't been to
Right.
Jackson in terms of while we were still in school, elementary and high school. Hadn't been to Jackson, so you didn't know what was going on outside of your community.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So tell us, when after you spent a few years as the head of nursing, was there a inspiration? What was it? What came to you to start the home health business? How did the concept come to
Yeah.
you? Because you
Well,
said you were the first African American. You could have
nurse.
sat there and just made your throne there. So
I've
what?
I've never been a person that's been satisfied with where you are. You have to have you have to be ambitious. What's next? Is this where you want to be the rest of your life? And I've always known that. Growing up poor and at the LPN school, after high school, and all of that, I was never satisfied with where I was. So it wasn't that I wasn't comfortable, but I always knew that there was more. And even though my mom was gone, my dad was gone, if it's in your heart to do it, you have to pave your way. I just think of my aunt, my mom were my mentors. Outside of that, I didn't have any mentors. But working at the hospital, and I had a friend who was her name was Maddie Straughter. She was on a committee in Jackson called the Healthcare Commission Committee, and she came to me one day and said, "The government is privatizing home health. Would you like to start an agency?" And
So
so
in the 80s or 70s?
that was in the 70s.
Wow.
And so I said yes. And so I went to work to see what I had to do and all that. While I was still at the hospital, there was a nurse from Jackson, Joyce Caracci, who would she was a surveyor for hospitals, and she was a surveyor for our hospital in Belzona. So one weekend she came. She would come and relieve me on the weekend, and so I told her I was going to leave the hospital and start my home health agency. And she said, "Well, why don't you start one for us here in Belzona?" She was from Jackson. "And when you get ready to open yours, we'll just turn everything over to you." Well, little girl from Belzona, Mississippi, naive. It was a handshake agreement.
Okay.
Well, when that time came, it never happened.
Oh.
And but that didn't stop me from going on and doing what I needed to do to get started. Well, when I told the Caraces that I was fixing to open my home health agency, her husband Vic Caraces said to me, "You'll never get it open, Clara, because you need $50,000 to open a home health agency." Well, didn't have 50,000. Didn't look like it. Didn't have any assets worth 50,000. Didn't have any assets at all. And so I left their agency and started our agency March 15, 1978. So we had two nurses with myself, two part-time secretaries, and an aide. So that was five of us. And so we worked 6 months without any pay.
Oh,
So determination is what you got to
right.
have. So Henry and I went to the bank to try to borrow. No bank would loan us any money. And so one of the banks in Belzona did uh, lend us $2,000. We used that $2,000 for 6 months to buy gas to go into the home to see our patients. But every day we saw a patient, I was waiting. Once you apply, it takes about 6 months
So,
for you to get your provider number and all of
oh,
that. So we went through all that, but I was stacking my bills as we made visits to our patients. The day I got my provider number, I put the provider number on there, drove those claims to Jackson, Blue Cross of Jackson, Mississippi. And so that was in August. But by December of that year, I had everybody back paid.
oh,
Everybody was caught up. We never missed the
wow.
paycheck to this day.
Praise God.
So it's what you want to do. You put your mind to it. The same way
And you
it
paid
is
back
with
the
your marriage.
$2,000.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. But you know the funny thing about home care is that you have to train the bankers.
Oh,
No business operated like home health back in those days. They knew nothing about it. When you told them
right.
about it, nobody can survive because we were reimbursed cost. And so, but you had to work those months, and then at the end of 3 months, you had to do your financials. And if you owed Medicare money, they would send you. You'd have to give it back. If they owed you money for that last quarter, then they would send you the difference.
Mm,
So we did that, and the competition was fierce. Um, Most deals, as you probably already know, are made on the golf course
okay.
and after hours. Nobody invited me to the golf course and play golf, and not after happy hour. And so most 90% of our referrals came from the community,
Wow.
and the physicians at that time was very liberal in terms of if you say, we got this referral from the community, may we go out and do an assessment. We did
Hmm.
that, and we moved on. So that's how we stayed in business.
Wow.
As the years have gone by, competition was even stiffer. Um, Most of the physicians in any community were Caucasians. And so if I was competing with a Caucasian agency, then I was kind of left out. But thank God for Jesus.
Praise God.
Thank
Right.
God Easter is coming up, and I look back over my life, and he died, but he got up out of the grave. He
Right.
was resurrected. And because he did,
Hmm.
and I just think that is my calling. And one of the things, I had lots of offers to sell my business. But one of the things in the counties that we serve, there were mothers on welfare, single mothers, that couldn't take care of themselves. They were on welfare. So we brought them in, we trained them. Now, some of them still working for us. They have their own home, they take care of their children, they
Wow.
have a decent car, decent place to live, and taking care of themselves. So if I sold, guess what?
Some of them won't have a job, right?
Right.
So how many
That's right.
offices? I think you have almost 20 offices.
We have 11 home health offices,
Okay.
and we have about 10 or 12 personal care offices throughout
Okay.
Mississippi.
And then one hospice,
We have three hospice
three
provider numbers.
hospice offices.
So for our personal care, we have all 82 counties.
Oh,
For home health and hospice, we have a total of about 34. Some of the majority, 22 of those are home health and hospice for the rest of them.
oh
Hmm.
wow. Why
Yeah.
the name Mid Delta? Was it because of your location?
It was location.
Oh,
Belzona is the heart of the Delta, and that's where we came up with Mid Delta Home Health. We didn't have a hospice at first, but then it became Mid Delta Home Health and Hospice, and
wow.
the durable medical equipment. But now you just can't say Mid Delta because there are a lot of Mid Delta.
Oh, there's
Mid
a lot
Delta
of Mid
tractor
Delta.
companies, Mid Delta cafe, Mid Delta stores, Mid Delta, Mid Delta, Mid Delta, Mid Delta. So
What makes Mid Delta Home Health different from the others? You can talk to me. I'm not, but you can tell
yeah.
my audience what makes Mid Delta Home Health and Hospice different. There must be a difference from your perspective
Well,
compared to the I'm not saying the competition is not bad, but there
right.
must be something that makes you different.
Well,
Right.
there are only two Afro American home health agencies in the state of Mississippi. There were never but four. So my goal was not to make money.
Mm,
My goal was to be a service
to
that
the
would benefit
population. Right.
your constituents, the people there. When I was in the hospital, I saw um, patients going home from the hospital, back in the hospital in a week or so. So what that said to me, they need to be taught how to manage their chronic illness, their diabetes, their
Mm,
heart failures, their high blood pressure, and all of those illnesses. And so I thought that I could do a better job
mhm.
um, teaching them in the community because back at that time only public health nurses did home care. So what makes us different, for instance, we're doing telehealth.
Mm,
We don't get reimbursed for it, but we have to pay for it. Um, so we provide another layer of service. My goal has never been money and making a
mm.
profit. Now, that's not good business. Okay, we've sustained because we were service oriented, and being a nurse, that was my
Your
perspective,
perspective.
to provide the level of services that patients need and they deserve, and the money part will take care of itself.
Hmm.
Well, no, that's not so. So you got to do both. You've got to do the business end and you got to do the service end. But my goal is still service,
Hmm.
and we're trying to manage because there've been lots of cut through the Medicare program. But so we're trying to manage the number of visits we make to our patients without compromising quality.
Quality, right.
So I may have, for instance, there was we're looking at a one of the patient's records, and the nurse, admitting nurse, said she needed 27 visits.
Mm.
And so when my QA person asked her, "Why you need 27?" He has a wound, but she said, "Well, I really don't need to go into 3 times a week. I can go 1 time a week
Hmm.
because he can really change his dressing himself."
Wow.
So we're managing the income you have, very little
Right.
profit.
So, Miss Clary, we're going to cut out because we're
Okay.
going to come back. But there's a question I'm going to ask you when we come back. If you were to sell your Mid Delta Home Health Hospice today, how much would it be worth? It's going to give my viewers a perspective of the blessings of God upon your life. I'll see you next week. Don't miss the show. Write to me, P.O. Box 550 71294. God bless you. Jesus is Lord. Amen.